Hello guys, welcome again to my channel. This is Adebisi Daudu, known as Shalom as an author. In today's Living Beyond the Limit program module 1 series 3, we'll be looking into the summary of the programs which reads: Living Beyond the Limit modules program is based on faith building, spiritual growth and motivations that will enable the recipients of the modules programs on how to understand or have an understanding of the mechanism that will enable them to live beyond the limits and limitations of life. They be imparted with the mechanisms which are involved with the modules programs will enable them to live beyond the limits and limitations of life. As I've said in the first series and the second series, that the program modules is involving to summary of the programs, objective of the programs, and the overall objectives of the programs. Now let's look into the objectives of today's programs, which reads: the imparted are emotional self-sufficient, using the program modules living beyond the limit to impart into the non-emotional self-sufficient. Then now let's look now to the overall objectives of the programs. To be emotional self-sufficient is the beginning of creations and achieving destiny and purpose in life. Meanwhile, let's look into today's program objectives, outcomes, and skills of today's Living Beyond the Limit program module 1 objectives, which reads: as I've mentioned in the first modules 1, outcome, being in the process of self-sufficient. It says self-sufficient may not be in any process, rather self-sufficient may be in trusting and having faith in God. Then let's look into the outcomes. They standing in one belief and having faith. Then let's look into the skills of today, using appropriate word in terms of one challenges or circumstances. Then let's look into today modules knowledge. It has been able to utilize the appropriate words in terms of limit and limitations. Wow, that's fantastic. Then let's look now into today module program series 3, and it reads: living beyond the limits and limitations. Module 3: the missions of limit or limitations are unimaginable occurrences that try to influence our lives, purpose, goals, or destiny. These occurrences has been a phantoms for us not to understand and handle in our own strength or ability. Fourth, there's a question for us now, and it says: what are the first fundamental principles of first thing first in living beyond the limits and limitations? Before we go directly to this program today, there's a Bible verse for us in the book of Daniel 11:32b, which reads: but the people who know their God shall be strong and carry out great exploits. Wow, the people who know their God shall be strong. I know this morning that we all are believers, and those that are not believers, well, the Bible says to us this morning that we should be strong. Now then, let's go now down to what the program have for us. So living beyond the limit or limitation is not acquired by self-sufficient. Either is it achieved by individual skills, competencies, or abilities. Wow, there's an example in the book of Daniel 3:14, and it reads: and Zerubbabel said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my God or worship the image of God I have set up? Then it's like an example that will indicate to us what we have in the content of the module of today. Also, like there's also a questions which is indicating to us now, and it says how one can stand on his or her ground. As I've said, the program is based on living beyond the limits. We need to stand. We need to, Bible where we read now, it said Daniel, in the book of Daniel 3:14, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they stood on their ground. Like this content this morning is saying to us that we have to learn how to stand on our ground, in our beliefs, no matter what the time is saying to us. Well, let's go down now to the content of today. So everyone that lives beyond the limit of limitation, they stood on their ground. They did not allow unbelief to drive them from one stage to another. They stood on their faith in God and steadfast in their trust in the living Lord, who is able to make them to live beyond challenges or circumstances that may be befalling them in life. Also, there's also another questions that indicating the end of the programs. Now it says, how can limit and limitation obey you? Or how can limit or limitation obey one? And it's free. It says, limit and limitation will obey you when you do not allow it to drive you up and down. Also standing on your ground and believes in God. Well, as I usually say after the program modules also have like a end of programs, that kind of a recap of what we have been told or what we have read. Now there's an end of program module for module 3, and it's really module 3 enable one to have other ways or meaning of self-sufficiency and how to use it in one endeavors. Now this module 3, what we can gain from it today is that it enabled us, it gave us some kind of instances how we can stand on our ground no matter what is happening around us, how we will not move from one side to another side, but to stand on our ground no matter the limits or limitations. Also there's a questions. I don't know, maybe you have a question regarding limit and limitation that you would want me to answer. You can leave a comment on my YouTube channel, which I'll be able to share more light and also to interact regards to your questions on how to live beyond the limit and limitations. Also, we have a post assessment, and assessment says, are you be able to take a stand in recent challenges or circumstances? 2, do you have faith in God? And 3, which is the last post assessment for today's modules, it says, how is your competencies and ability to take a stand in a situations? I think with all these post assessments will enable us to gain more kind of informations and instances how we can stand and overcome the times we have now in regards to the limits and limitations. Also on my YouTube frames, there's a website, my website, which you can click, will take you directly to my website. Then you can click on each books and get more informations on how you can live beyond the limits and limitation. I hope these modules have already given us instances and enlightenment. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.